Alright, at this point I have totally glued the box together. I have flush trimmed the what was sticking out of the tails and the pins. I always leave them a little proud, so they were proud. I flush trimmed them. In some cases you can leave them proud and kind of put a nice chamfer on that, and I've done that before to good effect, but on this box I want it a little more clean looking. I think that would be a distraction, number one. Number two, they weren't quite proud enough to get a pronounced chamfer around all the exposed edges. And so I figured rather than waste the time trying to get it, maybe one doesn't turn out right and then I'm not happy with it, I'm just going to flush them all. They're all perfectly flush. How I do that is up here at the router table. I get a flush trim bit, top bearing mounted. And again, that might be a bottom mounted bearing. No, because when you buy the bearing, when you buy the bit, it comes like this, and so that would be a top-mounted bearing flush trim router bit. Yeah, so that's what I did. I chucked that up in the router table, and I took the box around, and basically I have it raised up enough that I could just go ahead and flush trim the proudness of the pins and tails, being careful because the pins and tails cause the box to stand up off of its sides. So once you take one set off, now it's going to be kind of canted to one side, so you've got to kind of play with it in a way and do it in a specific order such that it's always level, and that way you don't end up kind of cutting into the box at a bad angle. So long story short, I did all that. Then I went and used my secret weapon. I did have a few gaps. I mean, they're hand-cut dovetails. I'm certainly not a master. But what I do in that case is I take grain filler. I happen to have white oak grain filler, and there were some rough marks in here too that I covered up. I think there's a bug hole, 2 bug holes here, so I got one there. Just go over it with grain filler initially, and then I went ahead and sanded it with 80 grit. If that exposed more little hairline gaps, I went ahead and grain filled it again, wood fillered it again, went around with 120 grit. Then I looked over it, and after 120 grit, there was no more exposed gaps or cracks or anything like that. And so I went right to 220, and still, again, everything looks really nice. There's a little low spot here. I was not careful like I had told you to be careful, and I let the box dip down on me when I was flush trimming this side. So there's a little dip here. I'll be able to probably plane that out. No worries. So now, at this point, the next step, the box top is not exactly flush going around here. So my next step in box making is taking a plane to the top and strategically leveling the box, paying close attention to the grain. So I identified this was a high corner, this was a high corner, which is good because those are the corners that happen to be sticking up and they're not flush. So in theory, if I knock these 2 corners down and just kind of level them out, this is a little closer to level, this is closer to level. So I want to take a little more off of here than I do off of here, and I'll show you that right now. And I'm going to use my block plane for this. All right. So because it tapers, I've got flush here and I've got sticking up by a 32nd back here. I want to take multiple strokes going this direction and finally ending with one long pass out here. That should give me what I'm looking for. Now, if you get resistance like I'm getting, like you see me getting, don't be afraid to put a little wax. Keep a little chunk of a candle around. And I just put a little bit of wax on there. by the time you're done sanding, it's not going to affect the finish. Okay, that is almost perfect. I could take a little more off of here. Beautiful. Something to pay attention to. The reason I like to use my block plane, obviously it's smaller, which allows me to have more control, but you can actually use the different sides of the box to reference the block plane off of. So when I'm starting here, once I get the stock taken off, I'm kind of sliding the block plane along this side. That keeps me level and in the same plane so that I don't end up kind of with a canted edge on this box side, which is what I would do if I just kind of tried to freehand it. So you want to be careful you don't do that. Now this is my other high spot. I'm going to flip it over. Hopefully the grain is going the right direction, and it looks like it is. So I lucked out there. A little more wax on there. Alright, that seems pretty good. I have just a thousandth on each side, so I'm going to take one more full length pass across here. And again, like I said, I'm going to reference off this side and kind of draw the plane over. And now I know that I'm in the same plane as the other side of the box. And then I can follow it through the cut. Boom, perfect. Okay. So now, in theory, this should be hopefully perfectly flat, level, but I doubt it. Wow. Okay, so I got lucky. That usually doesn't happen like that. And what I'm looking for is for a rocking noise. Sometimes the box will rock back and forth. That indicates that you've got a high corner somewhere. In this case, I do not. I got really lucky, and I'm just going to double check, go around and look, make sure I don't have like a belly in one of the sides. And by belly I mean something like that, where I've got a gap in the middle but the outsides are high. And that looks actually really good, so that's good. That means I was only off by a little bit. That's understandable. Now the next part is the bottom, and the bottom seems to be perfectly flat. Some guys will take the box to sandpaper and kind of slide the whole thing around on sandpaper, and I've done that a time or two. I just feel like the plane, first of all, you got to find a flat surface. You've got to adhere the sandpaper to the flat surface, and it just is a pain. I find the block plane is a little easier. That said, I have been in situations where you going down the rabbit hole where I'll tackle these high spots, I'll go test it. Now these are high spots, I'll tackle these high spots. Now these are high spots, and I'm just going after it for a while. I'm probably taking an eighth of an inch off the top of a box or the bottom of a box, so be careful. I got lucky on this one, so we are pretty much to the stage where I can start cutting my lid blank out of 3/8 inch MDF, and possibly throwing a little bit of finish, a little bit of oil on that box just to see what it's going to look like, and also to lock in the wood filler that I have in the gaps. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and turn you back on in a few. Alright, so put some finishing touches on it. By finishing touches, I was looking at the box and I felt like just a small chamfer, and I'm guessing this chamfer is, well, let's not guess, I will give you an exact. That is about a 1/16 of an inch. A 1/16 of an inch chamfer on all edges. So the top rim is chamfered, the edges, the four corners are chamfered, and the bottom four edges are chamfered. So a total of, I guess, 12 edges chamfered. On the interior, I just did a slight round over with 120, 220, 320, just to ease these edges and make them, you know, not so sharp for reaching into it. I also went around it with hand sanded to 320 grit, being sure to sand the chamfers as well. So it's at 320 and it's ready for some oil. That's where we're at now. And again, for anybody watching this video who hasn't watched any of my other videos, I use, in almost any application, any project that I do, my first step in finishing is my homemade varnish, which consists of typically drying oil, a boiled linseed oil, a tongue oil, 33%, one-third mineral spirits, and one-third polyurethane, gloss polyurethane. And that's just something I do. I feel like oil makes the grain pop a little better, and I get a little better depth. So especially in these woods like white oak, where I have a lot of this is quarter sawn, so I expect to see some ray fleck pop out. I really want to get as much depth as I can out of this. A lot of guys will just go right to polyurethane, and I've done that before, and it just doesn't seem to pop quite as much. Same thing with shellac. Shellac is another great first step. It dries quickly. You know, it fills the pores, so you don't have to put quite as many coats of polyurethane on afterwards. But again, I just don't find that it makes the grain pop quite as much as oil does. So this is always my first step. I also tend to enjoy the ambering effect that it has on woods like white oak. And I oil I oil every surface I can oil. So the inside, the outside, the bottom of the bottom. Everywhere I can get oil, I put oil on it. And if you're wondering why I do my own homemade varnish and not just a boiled linseed oil or a tongue oil, I could tell you that, and I'm not sure how true this is, but I feel like adding a little bit of polyurethane to it makes it a little tougher. So obviously the idea of the oils penetrate into the wood's surface well below it. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, well, that would be nice if it could carry a little bit of polyurethane with it and sort of plasticize the wood fibers, at least the top layer. So in my mind, that's what's happening. Whether that's actually happening or not, I couldn't tell you, but it makes me feel better, and so I do it. And since it has polyurethane and mineral spirits in it, I know with a lot of the drying oils, they tell you to flood the surface, wait a little while, flood the surface again. I do not do that. I apply this sort of like a wiping polyurethane, and then I just put it on, make sure I reapply to dry spots, but I will not let it dry and come back and reapply. I will simply, get it saturated once, let it sit, and let that dry, and I will not put polyurethane top coat on it until at least 72 hours later. Long enough for it to cure, at which point I can kind of sand it with either 600, 800 grit, something real fine, just to level out any fibers that might have popped up on me. So I gotta say, it's looking pretty sharp. The Sapelli inlay is kind of popping. I like that. I like that a lot. The quarter sawn ray fleck. I mean, I don't know if you guys can get that in the light, but that looks pretty sweet. I like that. The mahogany box bottom looks nice. It's a nice contrast with the white oak. So now I am going to set this aside. Like I said, let this dry for at least 72 hours before messing with the finish. In reality, I'll probably let it dry till tomorrow, and then tomorrow I will start selecting my veneer and my MDF for the lid, and I will show you guys every minute of that, because that's something that I don't see a lot of people doing, and I'm not sure if anybody is doing it. So I have a method whereby I create the lid a little bigger than the box, and then I use the box upside down on my router table with a flush trim bit and flush trim the lid to the box. And the result is a lid that is absolutely perfectly matched to the box. And as I had explained earlier, because it's MDF, it stays dead flat. It does not suffer from wood movement. So there's a good shot of the ray fleck. Beautiful. Beautiful stuff. Awesome. One thing that I do see that I wish I would have paid a little more attention to is that it looks like I made this tail stick out a little bit higher, and so I have a little bit of inlay showing here with the smaller tail, but with the either a larger tail or the tails are pushed up a little farther on this one. There is no little sliver inlay there, so that's not symmetrical. That kind of bugs me, but that's why that's going to be the back. So that's all for now. Hey, welcome back to the shop, guys. Another day at the Addicted to Woodworks wood shop. When I left off the last time, I was making the dovetailed box. I had put oil in the box and I was going to let it dry and start working the lid. So I've done that. I just wanted to show you guys what I decided on and also sort of how I went about it. Bear with me here. I'm going to take you out to the box. I've got it drying out here off the bench. So let me grab this thing and bring it over here. This is how the box turned out. Again, I was very happy with it. Dovetails look great. Everything looks great. It just needs a lid. And for the lid, I'm going to do my signature veneered lid. But I was telling you guys that I was going to use 3/8 inch MDF. And when I went to check my stock, I do not have a piece of 3/8 inch MDF left that's big enough to really do this the right way. So what I'm going to end up having to do is use 1/2 inch plywood. So I found some 1/2 inch plywood. It is maple plywood. It's not fancy. It's just the big box store stuff. And what I did is I tried to find a piece free of voids, and I got lucky. The piece that I found is free of voids. I find that the freer your piece is, in this application, the freer your piece is of voids, the less chance you're going to have of it warping or doing anything that you don't want it to do. And of course, we want this to stay dead flat. That's the whole purpose. So what I did, the opening of the box, and I hope you guys can see this in the lower light. The opening of the box is actually a little bit bigger than my cutout, than my blank. And that's on purpose because we're going to trim the edge of this lid blank with solid wood, a matching solid wood for the veneer that we choose. And so I think typically what I do is I just take a measurement of the outside. I add about a 1/16 of an inch in each dimension, and then I subtract a 1/2 inch. And that should be the size of my lid blank. And what that'll do is it will allow you to cut 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch, or roughly a little wider than 1/2 inch, but 1/4 inch deep strips of solid wood edging all around your lid blank, and that will protrude over every dimension by about 1/16 of an inch, and that'll give you enough clearance to flip it upside down and run it on a router table and really flush trim it to the box and end up with a perfect lid. So that's how I got to this lid blank. Now, I was looking through my veneers, and again, in this application, one of the tricks is if you're going to use a veneer, you also have to have solid wood of that same veneer for this trick to work. And so there were some cool veneers I really wanted to use, but I did not have solid wood, like Cadillacs. I got some really cool Cadillacs veneer. Maybe I'll show you guys that sometime. But I don't have any Cadillacs wood. It's not solid wood. So I wouldn't be able to trim the edges in Cadillacs. I might be able to do a workaround, like dye some black walnut black and have it look okay, but that's just, I don't want to wing it here. I want to show you guys how I've made all the other 25, 30 lids this way. So this is how I do it. I settled on, and this is the first time I've used this stuff, man. I've been really dying to use this. This is redwood stump. Redwood stump. And from what I understand, redwood stump is often curly, and this is very curly. It's got all kinds of crazy figure in it. It's got like some bark inclusion. It's got some curl. It's got maybe some crotch right around there. I probably won't use the crotch or any of the other crazy stuff. I'm probably going to take a nice chunk out of that beautiful curly section right there. And I have a flitch. I've got like 25, 30 pieces of this. So I should be able to get the bottom. If you can see, these are 2 pieces that were in series. So it's sort of the same pattern. I should be able to basically lay these up and lay my box blank, once my lid blank rather, once I get it edged and trimmed in solid wood, down over and find a spot. And typically at that point, and I'll take you through this when I get there, I will take that lid blank trimmed out and lay it over top and draw a circle or draw a square, trace it with pencil. That will allow me to pull it away and look and see exactly what kind of veneer will be on the top of that lid. If I'm happy with it, cool, I'll go ahead and cut it out. If not, I can kind of move it around, trace it again, and get the exact look that I want. So that's the veneer I'm using. And the answer to the next question is yes. I do have solid redwood that I got on eBay a while back. I got real lucky. I ended up getting like probably 20 board feet of this stuff in sections like this. They were 2 foot long 6 by 1 by 6 or 3/4 by 6 boards of this incredible old growth. See if I can get in the light the growth rings, but I counted on one of these. There's 106 growth rings just on a 6-inch board. So this is probably, I can't even begin to fathom, to guess how old a tree this came from, but I would say at least several hundred years old. So this is a sequoia. This is redwood lumber, and it is itself curly, which is going to be cool. Hopefully I can orient the curly side out, maybe. We'll see. I should be able to do that. And then maybe have the curl wrap around the lid. But at any rate, that's it. I've got my redwood solid wood. I've got my redwood veneer. The next step is going to be trimming the outside of the lid blank with 1/4 inch by 9/16 strips of this curly redwood. So I'm going to go ahead and get those cut up at the bandsaw, and I'll see you back here in a few minutes. Alright guys, I just got back from the bandsaw. So here are my strips. These are the solid redwood, what will be edging for the 1/2 inch plywood. Just wanted to walk you through my process. Obviously, you saw that board. I took it over, I jointed the edge jointed it, and then ran it through the bandsaw at a fat 1/4 inch. And so that's what I'm left with here, is something that's a little over a 1/4 inch. The 1/4 inch part doesn't really matter as long as it's fatter than a 1/4 inch, and which it is. At that point, you now have a rough sawn surface, a band sawn surface, and on the other side you have that nice smooth jointed surface, which is good, perfect. On the next pass, I took it, well obviously I ran both pieces, so I ended up with both of the pieces that I need. In this case I'll be able to get a long side and a short side. In fact, I might even be able to get 2 longs. I'll have plenty, put it that way. So make all your cuts with the fence setting there. Now I need to get the width dimension, and as I said earlier, this is 1/2 inch plywood. As we all know, that means that doesn't really mean anything. It's probably less than 1/2 inch. At any rate, I set my fence to, I think it was 9/16, maybe a little fatter than that. The thing is, you don't want to leave too much. If I would have just left it at 3/4 of an inch, which I've done in the past, now you've got 1/8 of an inch on either side to clean up, and that can be a chore. Sitting here with a block plane, and I've tried using a flush trim router bit and holding it perfectly upright. Pain in the butt. Just cut it close. It's not super important. You can end up with a little tiny piece maybe that sits below the plywood. Just the trick is you got to sand it. This has to be flat on both sides. Definitely on the bottom surface, because the bottom surface is ultimately what's going to rest on the box, the rim of the box. And so if the bottom is not dead flat, you're going to have a gap and it's not going to seat properly. And that's the whole point of going through this process to make a lid like this, is so that that thing is dead flat. It sits perfectly flat on the rim of the box, no matter the season, and it doesn't look big and bulky like sometimes the frame and panel lids can. So I've done that, and I'm left with this. The nice thing is, because we started, and I forgot to mention, I jointed the board before I made my first 1/4 inch cut, and then I also went back and jointed it again, because now the edge of the board that I ran through the first time had bandsaw marks, so I jointed it again. The end result is now my 2 pieces along the widest width rather, are nice flat jointed surfaces. And that's the only surface that really matters in this, because that is going to be the surface that we glue against the edge of our plywood. The outside doesn't matter, because we're going to flush trim route that to the box. The top and the bottom don't really matter, because we're going to be planing those off with a block plane, sanding them down, and ultimately veneering right over top of the edge banding. And what that's going to allow us to do is put a round over or a chamfer or some sort of edge detail that you otherwise couldn't, because now you've got a 1/4 inch of room all around the box. So you can actually put a nice healthy round over, and in theory, as it's worked with all of my other boxes, you will not be able to tell where the transition from the veneer to the solid wood back to the veneer is, and it will look like a solid wood, with the exception of a lack of end grain. But again, I mean, most people looking at it are going to be just amazed by how beautiful it is. Only woodworkers like ourselves may notice that, hey, where's the end grain? That's not real, that's not solid redwood. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and cut these up now. Typically the box that I showed you before, in fact I'm going to take you out and show you a couple more, because I found some more that I had done a while back that are really nifty looking, and I wanted to show you how I usually do these, and forgive me, they are really dusty, but here is an example of a sapelli lid. Now this lid is obviously edged in sapelli, veneered with sapelli, and then I did some cool cherry inlay where I did the knots. See if I can get the dang glare out of there. See the veneer, or the inlay, kind of passes under and over each other. But that, if you look on the edge of this, apologize for the camera work here, you can see the end grain of the edge banding. And that's typically how I do it. I don't miter the corners, because again, you're not fooling too many people. So if you're not fooling too many people by it not having end grain, I never saw the importance of going through the trouble of mitering these. It's just a lot easier to mark it and cut it to fit. But I think on this box, to challenge myself, I'm going to go ahead and miter the corners so that you don't see any end grain around the edge. And to do that, I am going to use my new Rockler. Well, it's not new, I just haven't used it. My Rockler miter jig. And I'm hoping this thing works. I tuned it up, tuned it to fit my miter slot. I just haven't had a chance to use it yet. So I will report back, and hopefully the next time I turn the camera on, I will have 4 perfectly mitered, perfectly fit pieces, and I'll be ready to glue those on, and I'll show you how I do that. I employ, in the beginning I used to employ blue tape. Now I employ a combination of blue tape and strap clamps that I made myself. So, see you in a couple minutes. Okay, so the mitering went well, aside from one little snafu, but I'm going to explain to you why it really doesn't matter that much. The issue was I cut this piece. I told you you wanted to try to keep the nice flat jointed side down. So that is your glue surface. But on this piece I did not do that, and rather I got the pieces are absolutely identical in length, and rather than going back and trying to recut that, I'm just going to use it. And here's the reason. Yes, it's bandsawn, it's not going to be a great glue surface, but it really doesn't need to be. There's going to be glue on there. It's bumpy, and so there's going to be many points of contact that are nice and tight all the way down there. And again, this is not a glue joint that is going to see any sort of stress. It's literally going to be glued over. So it just needs to stay on, and I'm confident that I will be able to get it to stay on. So my next issue is, again, I've said I've never mitered around my box lid blank before. I usually just run a piece and just do a butt joint, and that in doing it that way, I will just put the 2 pieces. I get these 2 pieces cut. You can get these 2 pieces as long as you want them. Measure in between, get my shooting board out and shoot it until it's a nice tight fit down inside, and then I just put it all together. So this is my first time mitering around here, and so I'm wondering, typically with miters, you know, at least I lay the miters out something like this, end to end. Will actually be flipped over, and I tape them up, and that helps hold the miters together. But I'm not sure that is going to be a great way to do this. I guess it could be. My only concern is, not only do I have to have the miters completely come together and enclose this lid blank, but I have to make sure that I have a little bit of stock above and below the surface of this plywood. And so I'm just worried about having enough time and flexibility to be able to manipulate all 4 pieces when they're taped together at the corners. But I think I'll be able to do it, so I'm going to give it a shot. So here we go. I'll put these together. I'm actually going to do it on here because this is flat, my workbench is not. And again, I'm using white tape because it's stronger and stickier. Oh, that's annoying. It's just singing the praises and it starts to get weird on me. Alright, let's start over here. Important that you keep these, because we need to bend these around this box lid. They need to be perfectly in line. We know that they're the same thickness because we cut them on the same fence setting. So just keep an eye on that. If you've got one that's misaligned or off by a few millimeters or thousandths of an inch, that might affect our ability to center them on the edge. as I said, we need to be able to make sure we have a little bit of stock above and below the surface of the plywood. Now I always like to burnish masking tape. It helps it stick better, it helps it stay stuck. Alright, I think we are ready to at least give this a shot. So, sitting here thinking, what would be the best glue choice? At first I reached for Type Bond Quick and Thick, but now that I'm thinking about it, I need some working time because I'm not sure I'm going to... It's going to be a chore, I think, to get this all glued up, wrapped around, and maybe manipulated. So I'm going to actually opt for Type Bond 3, which I have in this glue bottle. That'll give me a little more open time, working time, etc. And of course I've got to clear the cap because it's always dried shut. Gosh. Ooh, yep, there we go. We're ready. Okay. I can't imagine you need a ton of glue in the miters, honestly. Again, this is not a structural contraption here. This is literally just glorified edge banding. I'm not going to put a ton of glue. Well, I am going to put a ton of glue, it looks like, but I'm not purposely putting a ton of glue. I'm meaning to put not very much glue, because the more glue you put on, the more squeeze out and cleanup you'll have to do later. And now that I say that, maybe it's not such a bad idea, because in this case we're dealing with plywood, and I did not sand the edges of this plywood. I'm just leaving it raw right off the table saw. It's just a glue surface. The lid blank itself is square. I know that. That's the important part. The edge of the plywood is merely a glue surface. If I were to be using 3/8 inch MDF, which is typically my go-to in this procedure, I do like to sand that down to 320, and I feel like that, I know for a fact because I've witnessed it. It helps with glue absorption. MDF is thirsty. It will drink up a lot of glue, especially if it's right off of a table saw. So I always like to sand that to at least 320 before I put glue on it. Alright, so here we go. I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. Maybe I should start here. Place the end down. Get that positioned. Okay, I'm back. So you can't see me off camera. I'm trying to squeeze this shut and pull a piece of tape. If you do this, get your piece of tape ready to close the final joint before you don't have a hand with which to do so. Okay, so there's that. So this one is coming apart a little bit. So at this point, I'm basically just using my fingers to push the frame around inside the edge banding frame and try to center it as much as possible. As I expected, this is going to be an issue because I'm not getting good clamping pressure. So I'm going to grab a couple clamps and see if I can't fix that real quick here. Hopefully I can while keeping the miters together. Honestly, I've got kind of a gap on the one side. I'm hoping my pieces are cut properly. It's usually a sign that they're not. Wouldn't be the end of the world, and you'll see why here shortly. So I'm putting a clamp here. I'm going to go ahead and put clamping pressure because I can feel that I've got stock on both sides. And now I'm going to try to rotate this clamp such that I can get a clamp on this side. This is a chore, just like I thought it was going to be. Now I know why, or now I have another reason why I don't typically miter these. The end result, I think, will be cool looking, but I don't think it will be that cool looking. I mean, the lid itself is going to be the focal point. I don't think many people are even going to pay attention to what the corners look like. But it was cool to try, and you guys got to see me flail around here and fail, so you know if you want to attempt it. All right, so it is clamped up. It is not, it's not coming together quite as well as I had hoped it would. Excuse the close-up of my head there. But it's together, and I think once I plane it down and scrape the glue squeeze out off, yeah, it's going to serve its purpose. Again, this is just edge banding. We're going to veneer over the entire thing, so I think I'm happy with it. I won't know until it's completely dry, but it looks fairly good. It looks like I might have been able to cut a little bit more off of this piece. I don't do a lot of miters, I'll be honest with you. I enjoy dovetails. I've done far more dovetailing than I have mitering. I don't know why. It's just it's not been something in my projects that has seemed attractive to me. I always find another way to do it. So I'm by no means a professional or even even an amateur level at doing mitering, as you can see. So maybe you guys will have more success at this, or at least get it to close up better. But that's it. I will turn the camera off now, let this dry, and I will turn it back on when I start leveling the surface. And again, this is perfect. I've got maybe 32nd of an inch to a 16th of an inch on both sides. It'll be real easy just to take a block plane referencing off of the flat inside of the lid and just basically shooting the plane outward, and it will end up shaving the edge banding down to the level of the reference surface, which is the lid. And that's a big one. So I'll see you in a few.